Welcome to the Comfy Chairs, a podcast from 123 Limited. Today's episode is part of our new series, Comfy Chairs Hard Questions, comfyHQ, a bite-sized offering to help grow our knowledge of leading and learning. For these shorter episodes, I want to provide you with the opportunity to share your questions. These can include asking for more information about specific episode topics, like imposter syndrome, adaptability, emotional intelligence, or how to tackle day-to-day leadership challenges. Any subject that fits in the beautifully broad category of leading and learning is suitable. I'll do my best to share what I know, and if all goes well, we'll learn together. So for today's answers from comfyHQ, we're going to look at two questions about delegation and feedback. What are some effective ways to delegate without micromanaging? Being labeled as a micromanager is a common concern, but frankly, micromanagement is a pretty misused, poorly defined, and little understood concept. So before we talk about good delegation, let's get clear on what micromanaging is and isn't. Real and true micromanaging is about control. It's when a leader exerts control over every aspect of an employee's work. This includes decision-making, processes, prioritization, and techniques. And like just about any misapplication of control, much of what gets labeled as micromanaging is really a result of fear or low trust. It could be that someone micromanages their team because they're afraid for their own job, or they have low trust in their employees, or an employee calls someone a micromanager because they don't trust their leader or don't feel respected for their abilities and competence. More often than not, in my experience, the label micromanager is actually a sign of a broken relationship and not genuine micromanagement. So let's be clear. Micromanaging is not setting clear expectations. It's not providing feedback along the way, nor is it correcting mistakes. Those are management. But if trust is low or fear is high, they won't feel that way. Set aside your fears of being a micromanager and focus on managing. Get clear about why the work, a task, project, or other assignment is necessary and how it supports the company goals, what the specific expected results are, any necessary guidelines for how to accomplish work, and by when everything is due. And I've said for years that clarity is the foundational leadership skill. This is the way we distinguish management from micromanagement. Are why, who, what, and when clear? And if you can consistently say yes, then effective delegation is the natural outgrowth of that clarity. Let's break this down and explore what someone who is managing might do or say versus what you would see if micromanagement was present. Start with, is it clear who does what? In some departments, the line between the employees and the manager's work can be different depending on the day or even the task. Is it my job to finish this task, this report, or does the manager need to take it from here? Micromanagement would keep this line blurred and uncertain all the time. An employee might start the report only to discover that the manager has already collected all the data, or they might be required to provide granular updates every step of the way, despite being the go-to person and expert for this report. A manager who is an effective delegator will articulate the varying levels and forms of responsibility in a case like this. One way to approach this is to do an exercise I like to call yours, mine, and ours. Identify the various projects and deliverables for the week or month or other time frame and discuss each person's role. It may sound like, I'm responsible for submitting the quarterly numbers. You have the job of validating the report 2 days before the submission due date, and so on. Managing never assumes. Managers who delegate well empower their employees with clear direction. In addition to the what that covers the work, you also need to be clear about what outcomes are required or expected. Without this information, you run the risk of creating a situation where you have to repeatedly ask for more, different, or other. And that looks a lot like controlling micromanagement. Next, ask, is it clear by when? Frankly, every assignment should have a date or time frame associated with it. When we miss this important detail, it opens the door to confusion and creates the circumstances where employees may naturally feel they are being micromanaged. If I'm the manager and I know that a project is due by the end of the month, but I haven't communicated and verified this, the team will be understandably surprised or frustrated when I start asking for updates, especially if I wait until we're near the deadline that no one really knows about, and I'm telegraphing concern or outright panic. That's the shape of micromanagement. Delegation does the job of making deadlines explicit, reasonable, and frequently discussed. Is it clear that this work connects to our why? Because I said so is only for parents of toddlers, not managers. If you are not able to connect an assignment to the larger picture and purpose of your organization, you should be questioning whether or not it even needs done, not delegating it. When managers hand out assignments with no rhyme or logic and attempt to call this delegation, they are not managing. This is cluttering your employees' time and energy. This is overloading your team. And when they are overloaded, any follow-up or questions will look or sound like micromanagement. When employees don't know the why, you're treating them like children, and they will feel very naturally like you are trying to control them. When you don't or can't connect a task to your why, you will appear to be withholding information. And let's be honest, in these circumstances, you're either a micromanager or a liar. The good news is that connecting to the why doesn't have to be complicated or even difficult. Your organization's mission, vision, values, or behavior standards, even the job descriptions for people on your team, will have the answers you need. You don't have to create anything new. You just need to see and say, this assignment connects here. Let's try to pull this all together. Good delegation equips your employees with the information they need to get the job done. This means being clear about what their role and responsibilities are, what exact outcomes you expect, the deadline or timelines for completing work, and how the task connects to the bigger picture. Here's what it could sound like. Jane, I'd like to delegate this month's time card audit to you. I know you're interested in learning more about how we schedule, and I think this could be a good introduction to the process. This means you will be responsible for running the time clock summary report, reviewing our scheduling guidelines, and doing a day-by-day validation of the audit period to our posted schedules. We value accuracy in our time cards because it means that everyone is being paid correctly and we're managing our payroll budgets. I'll share the audit summary report with you and answer any questions about how to fill it out. I'd like to see a draft of your summary report by the 15th. What questions do you have right now? This example is clear about what the assignment is, why it's being delegated to Jane and not someone else, and what steps Jane should take. It also connects to the why, paying employees correctly and being stewards of payroll dollars. The leader also provides guidance for their part in the task and sets a deadline. Notice too that this delegation ends with a question, an invitation to begin addressing the employee's questions or concerns. Effective delegation avoids the pitfalls of micromanagement because it controls the moment of assignment, the information the employee receives, and not the employee or their efforts. Today's second question pairs really well with the topic of delegation. It is, what are the best strategies for giving constructive feedback? Effective feedback can be accomplished in minutes, sometimes even faster than that. 3 statements and 1 question are all you need to start a feedback conversation. This is what you did. This is why it matters. This is how to proceed. What do you think? What, why, how? But before we go too far, let's talk about feedback, specifically some misconceptions and attitudes that have warped our relationship with feedback. Here's the starting point. Feedback is not punishment. Let that sink in. When you give or receive feedback, no one is being punished. If you are cloaking punishment as feedback, you have other problems and probably shouldn't be in leadership. But I digress. Feedback is a conduit. It is the only way we understand the quality and effectiveness of our work. Ideally, the majority of the feedback we receive should come from our direct manager, which means if you are a leader, then you should be spending a good deal of your time devoted to providing employees with feedback, which is not punishment. This is not to say that it will always feel good or that people will welcome it. But if we start with understanding the truth that feedback is not a punishment and it is a leadership responsibility, we are ready to understand a few other key facts. I appreciate that this question asks specifically about constructive feedback, because that qualifier points to one of these facts. There are many types of feedback. It can help to think of a spectrum or scale. On one end, we find all praise. On the other, all problem. Constructive feedback does sit toward the latter end, where we address problems, but it serves the same purpose as any other form of feedback, to communicate with someone about their performance and the effect of their actions. The nature of those, performance and effect, will define the nature of the feedback, and nothing else. Not your opinion of the person, not where they went to school, not the color of their shirt, the measurable, demonstrable performance and effect of what they have done, not who they are. I get pretty firm here because one of the problems we have to address when it comes to any type of feedback, and especially constructive feedback, is that it is not about the person. This is why true feedback is not a punishment, because it keeps the spotlight on actions and outcomes, not people. Here's the last key fact I'll discuss. Effective feedback is grounded in good intent, and that cuts both ways. You begin by assuming good intent on the other person's part, and you ensure your intent for delivering feedback is good. I want to be a little heavy-handed here, even prescriptive. Your good intent should be wanting the best for the other person. I call this love. That's a conversation for another day. At any rate, when you are motivated by love, by wanting the best for someone, this includes sharing a difficult message that will help them improve their performance. So let's turn our focus to the core of this question: strategies for giving constructive feedback. I'm going to draw on the statements I've already made to give you a starting point. First, get clear about your intent and the specific action or outcome you need to address. I like to think of this as starting with checking that my heart and my head are right. Do I know my motivation, and do I know the facts? Second, evaluate those facts. Are they actual facts or are they interpretation? Are you telling yourself a story or creating an accurate account of what happened? One indicator for you here is the presence of adjectives and adverbs. Is one of your facts, Bill missed his third deadline this month? Or is it, Bill never meets even the easiest deadlines? Next, don't delay. Feedback that waits too long isn't helpful. While it's true that sometimes circumstances can mean you're not able to provide timely feedback, that should be the exception, never the rule. Personally, I try to deliver all feedback as close to the event as possible, real time whenever I can. But in general, if you haven't done it within a week or two, don't. You've waited too long. Again, in general, this is a recommended guideline from a podcast, not a rule or policy. Why do I advocate for immediate feedback? For the sake of impact, relevance, and memory. Too long after the fact, the importance of what someone did or didn't do will fade. The details will too. Another consideration, choose your time and place. Time in this case is not how long after the event, but actual time. Time of day, time of week, within the context of whatever's going on. Consider what else the employee has on their schedule. For example, you probably don't want to deliver a hard feedback message right before Bill has to present to the board. For example, you probably don't want to deliver a hard feedback message right before Bill has to present to the board. Part of wanting the best for someone is understanding when is best. And regarding place, it may seem obvious, but let's state it. Deliver difficult feedback in private, and check with HR on any policies or procedures that might define how, when, and where really tough feedback needs to happen. But the one main strategy or approach I want you to take from this is where I started for this answer. 3 statements, 1 question. This is what you did. This is why it matters. This is how to proceed. What do you think? It can sound something like this. Bill, you have missed 3 deadlines this month. Not only does this not meet our department's schedule and my expectations, but your late reports have resulted in multiple delays down the line. Because you didn't file the quarterly summary by the 1st, it meant April wasn't able to complete the end of your audit without working significant overtime that wasn't in our budget. Naturally, I want to see you meeting your deadlines from here on out, and I expect you to notify me immediately if you encounter any further delays. Specifically, you should assess your progress every day, and if you believe you won't be able to complete your reports in time, I need to know at least 3 days beforehand. Now, I have 2 questions. First, is what I'm asking you to do going forward clear? And what prevented you from meeting these 3 deadlines? I want to see how I can help. Here is something I love about effective leadership: the simple symmetry. Notice how effective feedback echoes effective delegation. What, why, how. Why, who, what, when. Did you notice that? When you delegate or set any expectation effectively, you are setting the stage for the feedback that will follow. Last thought. When facing constructive feedback, ask yourself, what are we doing when we construct? We're building. We're making something new and, we hope, better. So what will your feedback create? That's all for this comfyHQ episode. Thanks for your questions, and thank you for listening. Comfy Chairs Hard Questions episode will be out every other week between in-depth conversations about leading and learning. If you have a question for comfyHQ, I would love to hear it. Just use the link in the show notes. Next week, I'll be back in the comfy chairs for a conversation about leadership styles with Paul Thornton. I hope you can join us.